This is the story of how one island, sitting roughly 100 miles off the coast of China, became so essential to the global economy that a single war over it could erase more than $10 trillion from world GDP in a single year. Taiwan covers less ground than the Netherlands, holds a population of about 23 million people, and sits at the center of a doctrine that some call the most important strategic concept of the 21st century, the Silicon Shield. Over the next 20 minutes, we are going to break down exactly how this happened, including how one company on one island ended up producing 92% of the world's most advanced computer chips. You will learn why Warren Buffett purchased billions of dollars of stock in that company and then dumped all of it just months later. The United States Secretary of Commerce called the prospect of losing this island absolutely devastating. And some American defense officials have openly argued that if China invades, the United States should destroy these factories before they fall. Let's start with the term itself. The phrase Silicon Shield came from an Australian journalist named Craig Addison back in the year 2000, who used it first in a newspaper op-ed and then expanded the idea into a book published in 2001, titled Silicon Shield: Taiwan's Protection Against Chinese Attack. A documentary film followed in 2009. Addison's argument was simple. Taiwan had become so critical to the global supply of semiconductors, those tiny silicon chips powering every modern electronic device, that no major economy could afford to see the factories destroyed or captured. The world's reliance on Taiwanese chips, in this view, would deter Chinese aggression because China itself depended on Taiwanese chips for its own economy, and the United States and its allies had every incentive to keep the supply chain running. The chips themselves, in other words, became a kind of armor. The concept stayed mostly inside policy circles until Taiwan's then-president Tsai Ing-wen elevated it. Writing in Foreign Affairs on October 5, 2021, she described Taiwan's semiconductor industry as a silicon shield that allows Taiwan to protect itself and others from aggressive attempts by authoritarian regimes to disrupt global supply chains. Inside Taiwan, the local nickname runs even more evocative. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, known as TSMC, often gets called the country's sacred mountain that protects the nation, the divine mountain that guards the country. To understand whether any of that protection is real, you have to understand how Taiwan ended up here in the first place, because none of this happened by accident. The story begins in 1973, when Taiwan's government established the Industrial Technology Research Institute, known as ITRI. The goal was straightforward: to license semiconductor technology from abroad, train Taiwanese engineers, and build an industry from scratch. ITR. He acquired its initial chip-making process from the American company RCA, and by 1977 it had built Taiwan's first 3-inch wafer fab. By 1980, the government took the next step, establishing the Hsinchu Science Park on December 15th of that year, and modeling the site deliberately on California's Silicon Valley. The grounds covered 686 hectares. Today, that park houses more than 600 companies, employs over 160,000 people, and generates roughly 1 trillion new Taiwan dollars in annual output, of which 73% comes from semiconductors. That same year, UMC, United Microelectronics Corporation, was spun out of ITRI to become Taiwan's first commercial integrated circuit company. The real turning point arrived in 1985, when Taiwan's government recruited a man named Morris Chang to run ITRI. Chang had reached 54 years old, Born in Ningbo, China in 1931, he had fled to Hong Kong, then to the United States, earning degrees from MIT and a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford. 25 years at Texas Instruments followed, where he climbed to senior vice president overseeing the company's entire global semiconductor operations. Passed over for the chief executive officer job, he walked away, and that's when Taiwan came calling. In 1987, with backing from the Taiwanese government, Morris Chang founded TSMC at the age of 55, and the bet he placed would reshape the entire electronics industry. Until that moment, every major chip company, including Intel, Texas Instruments, and Motorola, both designed and manufactured their own chips. Chang's idea separated those two functions. TSMC would not design any chips at all. The company would simply manufacture them for anyone, including Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, any firm wanting to design chips without spending tens of billions of dollars to build factories. When Chang pitched the idea, almost every major chipmaker turned him down as an investor. Intel said no, Texas Instruments said no, and Motorola, AMD, Panasonic, and Sony all said no. Only one Western company put up real money, which was Philips of the Netherlands. That pure-play foundry model, manufacturing chips for fabless designers, went on to become one of the most successful business models in modern history. Today, TSMC stands as the most important manufacturer most people have never heard of. For the full year of 2025, TSMC reported revenue of $122.4 billion, marking a 35.9% increase from the year before. Its market capitalization sits at roughly $1.84 trillion, placing it among the most valuable companies in the world. The company employs about 90,000 people. The raw numbers don't capture what TSMC actually controls, but here is what does. During the second quarter of 2025, TSMC held a record 70.2% share of the entire global foundry market, meaning every chip manufactured for a third party anywhere on Earth. By the third quarter, that share climbed to 72%. Its closest competitor, Samsung Foundry, held just 6.8%. For the most advanced chips, those manufactured below 7 nanometers and used in AI processors, smartphones, and data centers, TSMC's dominance runs even more extreme. Taiwan as a whole produces roughly 92% of the world's most advanced logic chips, and TSMC remains the overwhelming source. If you own an iPhone, every A-series and M-series chip inside it has been manufactured by TSMC since 2016. Nvidia's H100, H200, and Blackwell AI chips, the processors fueling the entire generative AI boom, all came out of TSMC fabs. Every AMD Ryzen processor, every EPYC server chip, every Instinct AI accelerator, TSMC built them. In 2025, Nvidia overtook Apple as TSMC's single largest customer, driven by AI chip demand, and the top 10 customers alone account for 76% of TSMC's revenue. This is what people mean when they say the world economy rests on a single, small island. It isn't a metaphor. The phrase describes an industrial fact. The question of what happens if Taiwan goes offline isn't theoretical. War, blockade, or natural disaster taking TSMC out of the global supply chain would trigger a cascade nobody is prepared for. In May 2024, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo testified before the House Appropriations Subcommittee, and her words were blunt. She said, "It would be absolutely devastating. Right now, the United States buys 92% of its leading-edge chips from TSMC in Taiwan. Bloomberg Economics ran the numbers in January 2024 and again in February 2026. Their estimate for a full US-China war over Taiwan landed at roughly $10.6 trillion wiped from global GDP in the first year alone, or around 9.6% of global economic output, almost twice the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even short of war, the Rhodium Group estimated in 2022 that a Chinese blockade of Taiwan, with no shots fired and no invasion, just ships cutting off the island, would cost the world economy over $2 trillion. And the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, told the Senate Armed Services Committee in May 2023 that losing access to Taiwanese chip production could cost the United States around $1 trillion per year, every year, on an ongoing basis. These figures aren't theoretical numbers from think tanks. They come straight from the highest levels of the United States government and the world's leading financial institutions, which explains why Taiwan's semiconductor industry has become inseparable from American national security. TSMC stands as the most visible piece of this story, but it doesn't stand alone, and to understand the full picture, you have to look upstream. Every TSMC chip below 7 nanometers, meaning every cutting-edge processor in the world, comes out of a machine produced by a single company in the Netherlands. That company is ASML. Headquartered in Veldhoven, ASML holds a 100% monopoly on extreme ultraviolet lithography, the equipment required to print circuits at the smallest possible scale. Each EUV machine weighs around 180 metric tons. The system contains roughly 100,000 individual parts. Transporting a single one takes 3 Boeing 747s. The price tag runs between 150 million and 200 million euros, with the newer high-NA versions running closer to $380 million apiece. In 2024, ASML shipped 380 lithography systems worldwide, including 44 EUV machines, and the company's total net sales that year reached 28.3 billion euros. The development of extreme ultraviolet took roughly 30 years and more than $9 billion in research and development. The technology proved so difficult, so expensive, and so risky that ASML could only complete it because Intel, TSMC, and Samsung were all forced to co-invest just to keep the program alive. Intel put up $4.1 billion in 2012 for a 15% stake, while TSMC paid 838 million euros for 5%. When people talk about the chip war, it's worth understanding the full picture. The most advanced chips in the world get designed primarily in the United States by companies like Nvidia, Apple, and AMD. The manufacturing happens almost entirely in Taiwan by TSMC. The machines doing that manufacturing get built in the Netherlands by ASML. Take any single one of those nodes offline, and the entire system seizes up. The reason all of this gets called a shield, and not just a supply chain, is, of course, China. Since 1949, the People's Republic of China has claimed Taiwan as a province of China, even though it has never actually governed the island. Xi Jinping, in his December 2024 New Year address, publicly reaffirmed what he called the goal of historical reunification. Admiral John Aquilino, then head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, told the House Armed Services Committee in March 2024, "All indications point to the PLA meeting. President Xi Jinping's directive to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. tensions have sharpened in recent years. In August 2022, after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei, marking the highest-ranking U.S. official visit to Taiwan since 1997, China launched UN-precedented military drills around the island. 11 ballistic missiles were fired, the first such launches since 1996, and 5 of those missiles landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone. Chinese aircraft made roughly 450 incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone in August 2022 alone, the highest monthly number ever recorded at the time. When Lai Ching-te was inaugurated as Taiwan's new president on May 20th, 2024, China responded just 3 days later with a military exercise called Joint Sword 2024-A. October of that year brought Joint Sword 2024-B, following Lai's National Day speech. December 2024 saw what some analysts described as China's largest naval mobilization around Taiwan to date, though Beijing never officially named the exercise. These are not isolated incidents. Military analysts now describe them as a new normal of constant pressure. TSMC itself sits in the center of this storm, in Hsinchu, Taiwan, about 100 miles from the coast of mainland China. This is where the story gets darker and more contested. In 2021, 2 researchers named Jared McKinney and Peter Harris published a paper in Parameters, the journal of the U.S. Army War College, titled Broken Nest: Deterring China from Invading Taiwan, and it became the journal's most downloaded paper of 2021. Their argument ran like this: if China believes it can capture TSMC intact and use the facility for its own technological advancement, that creates a powerful incentive to invade, and so the United States and Taiwan should publicly pre-commit to destroying TSMC if an invasion begins. The reference points to a Chinese proverb, asking how there can be any whole eggs beneath a broken nest. Make the prize unwinnable, the argument goes, and you remove a key motivation for the war. Elbridge Colby, who in 2025 became the Trump administration's Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, has publicly endorsed this view. In a February 2024 tweet, he wrote, "Disabling or destroying TSMC is table stakes if China is taking over Taiwan." Would we be so insane as to allow the world's key semiconductor company fall untouched into the hands of an aggressive People's Republic of China? Taiwan, for its part, has rejected the doctrine. Then, Defense Minister Chiu Kuo-cheng stated in 2023 that Taiwan would not tolerate any U.S. attempt to destroy TSMC. Not everyone believes the Silicon Shield is even real. Mark Liu, who served as TSMC chairman from 2018 until his retirement in June 2024, told the New York Times in 2023, "China will not invade Taiwan because of semiconductors. China will not invade Taiwan because of semiconductors." In his view, the chips are neither cause nor cure. Joseph Wu, Taiwan's former foreign minister, has voiced something similar. If China decides to use military force, he argued, the existence of the semiconductor industry will not be the deciding factor, and other forces will be. There is also a structural problem with the shield. As the United States, Japan, Germany, and other allies pour money into building their own chip capacity, the world's dependence on Taiwan, by design, decreases. And if that dependence decreases, so does the deterrent. Which brings us to what is happening right now. In August 2022, President Biden signed the CHIPS and Science Act into law. allocating $52.7 billion specifically for semiconductor manufacturing in the United States as part of a larger package of around $280 billion. The goal was explicit. It was to bring chip production back to American soil. TSMC received a $6.6 billion grant and access to $5 billion in loans under the Act for facilities in Arizona. On March 3, 2025, Donald Trump and TSMC Chief Executive Officer C.C. Wei announced an additional $100 billion investment in Arizona, bringing TSMC's total committed investment in the United States to $165 billion. The plan includes 3 more fabrication plants, 2 advanced packaging facilities, and a major research and development center, C.C. Wei said at the announcement. Back in 2020, thanks to President Trump's vision and support, we embarked on our journey of establishing advanced chip manufacturing in the United States. We intend to expand our United States semiconductor manufacturing investment by an additional $100 billion, bringing our total planned investment to $165 billion. TSMC's first Arizona fab began volume production on its 4-nanometer node in late 2024. Production of 3-nanometer chips there is targeted for 2027. And 2-nanometer production is targeted for 2029. The company has also opened plants beyond the United States. The Kumamoto fab in Japan, known as JASM, opened on February 24, 2024, and a second fab there is targeted to begin operation by the end of 2027. In Germany, TSMC broke ground on a Dresden facility on August 20th, 2024, with more than 10 billion euros of investment, of which 5 billion euros comes from EU and German state aid. Morris Chang himself has remained skeptical of these efforts. Speaking at MIT in 2024, he warned that learning curves in semiconductor manufacturing depend on dense engineering ecosystems that cannot easily be replicated. He said, "Learning is local." His view holds that chips made in American fabs will simply be far more expensive than those made in Taiwan. Whether the silicon shield strengthens or weakens as a result of all this remains one of the great open questions of the next decade. There is one more data point worth examining, and it comes from one of the most cautious investors in American history. In late 2022, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway disclosed a roughly $4.1 billion investment in TSM. The position ran unusually large for a foreign technology company, exactly the kind of bet Buffett usually avoids. By the spring of 2023, Berkshire had unloaded the entire stake. At Berkshire's annual meeting in May 2023, Buffett explained the decision. He said, "I feel better about the capital that we've got deployed in Japan than in Taiwan. That is the reality, and I have reevaluated that in the light of certain things that have been going on." Speaking to Japanese outlet Nikkei in April 2023, Buffett confirmed that geopolitical tensions were a consideration in the sale. For a man who has held some positions for 40 or 50 years, owning and then dumping a chip company in less than 6 months tells you something about how the world's most experienced investors view the risk profile of this small island. So this is where we are. A single company, TSMC, founded by a single man, Morris Chang, in 1987, on a single island roughly 100 miles from mainland China, produces the overwhelming majority of the world's most advanced computer chips. That includes roughly 92% of America's leading-edge chips, every iPhone processor, every Nvidia AI chip, and every AMD Ryzen and EPYC and Instinct Accelerator. In 2025, TSMC alone earned $122 billion in revenue. Its market value sits near $1.84 trillion. The company holds more than 70% of the global foundry market, and it sits, geographically, between the world's two largest economies and the world's most dangerous potential flashpoint. Bloomberg estimates a war over Taiwan could cost the global economy more than $10 trillion in the first year. The Rhodium Group estimates a blockade alone would cost more than $2 trillion. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence has said losing Taiwanese chip access could cost America $1 trillion per year on an ongoing basis. This is the Silicon Shield. Whether it genuinely protects Taiwan from invasion or whether by drawing the world's attention to TSMC's irreplaceable value, it makes the island a bigger target, remains a question no one can yet answer with confidence. Even the people closest to it disagree. The president of Taiwan called it a shield. The chairman of TSMC said it was neither a cause nor a cure. American defense officials have debated openly whether they should plan to destroy it. What runs clear is this: the next decade of the global economy, including the AI revolution, the semiconductor build-out, and the geopolitical contest between the United States and China, all of it runs through one small island, one company, one supply chain, and one of the largest strategic dependencies in modern industrial history. That is the Silicon Shield. Thanks for watching.